Okay, we are live 8/18/2023, getting started a little bit early here. And if you're listening to the audio stream, you're welcome to come join the chats. Easy to do, just go to infiniteplane.live. Now, the usual channels are down, so I made it a point to go ahead and resort to our backup channel. Again, this is August 18th, 2023, live, open phones 505-349-0420. Let me go ahead and make sure the phones are on right now as well. And if you're in chat and you need a wrench, I will be handing them out here shortly. I know we're a few minutes early. I sent out notifications to let everyone know what time we would be. And I pre-scheduled a text alert blast. So we can expect a swarm probably in about 15 minutes. So anyone who's not checking their emails every 5 minutes, anyone who's not in our server over on Guilded, will be getting the news here in just a moment. The penguin signal has been sent. Okay, phones are officially open. Excellent. And I have a number of voicemails we'll get to as well. But let's go ahead and give people time to show up. Lots to talk about. I called out a crisis actor today. That was kind of interesting. I mean, the fact of it is, you don't have to be a member, a dues paying member of the Government Actors Guild. You don't have to be a gag to try to capitalize on a tragedy to make money or to get clicks. For some people, clicks are like currency for them. These are status points, way more valuable than just crisis actor money. So Kim, I'm not going to say the whole person's channel. I don't want to give him too much attention, but this person had this emotional outburst about the state of the world, mostly a lot of self-pity, and it wasn't very convincing. She was using like this really rough brown paper as Kleenex for her non-existent tears. I feel bad for her, the skin on her face. I mean, she was really trying to pull like a Sandy Hooker routine, the forced hyperventilating, attempting to look like she was actually crying. And I had said, crisis actor, ha ha ha, because this person went viral and other people are uploading it. Well, she actually has an account and she's been going around responding to it. And she said, I'm not a crisis actor, I'm real. Let's debate my pain. And I took it a little more seriously and I pointed it out that it's obvious you're fake crying, hyperventilating, and emotionally manipulating viewers. None of your complaints had any real substance, just vague grievance, self pity. But you could get a job with the Government Actors Guild if you weren't already a crisis actor. And the reason I had to explain it this way is that whatever this person's intentions, they just represent this large group of people I've seen who are kind of like free range crisis actors. Like they can't all be in on the big conspiracy, but there's a lot of people who realize that if you can sympathize or act like you're, caring really hard about some recent media event, the latest current thing, there's just money in it. It's just another grift, no different than what any of the professionals do. Joined by Evolvement, Zinvalis, Elephant Tusks, AJ206. Psy Obstacles is here from Twitch. Yes, Twitch is the record, the live stream record. It basically just stores everything. Doesn't matter how long the video is. It's great. I use it for archival purposes, but I linked it up, and we're also linked to the Discord server. Psyoptical says, I'm wondering if the government actors have union dues. See, I get the impression that most of them are getting deals, so they don't pay dues. They got some kind of a deal, get scraped out of some cell to do some dirty work. I think that's kind of the routine. And I don't think they have any protections. Like, they can be replaced by CGI, unlike the Hollywood actors who can kind of protest by showing that they actually exist. Joined by Lean Dion with the bat soup, the formerly banned emoji combination of the bowl and the bat. They used to ban that. Alright, phones are now officially open. I'll be monitoring the lines. I was not specifically just trolling on Twitter all day, but I just wanted to point out that it's okay to call out crisis actors. You cannot allow someone to act like their emotions give them a cudgel. Just because they're emotionally incontinent doesn't give them a platform. Doesn't mean that they are automatically given some kind of credibility. The Justice Department is seeking 33 years in prison for Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boy leader convicted of seditious conspiracy in the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack. Think about that. 33 years. Jake and Jelly, 33. Code Monkey Z, 33. There's something of a pattern here with these instigators, whether it's a religious cult or a political cult. You constantly see this. And this got me thinking about this more recent event. And I talked about it twice this morning, but each time the live streams were auto deleted by YouTube. So if you missed them, they're non existent. They found a way to somehow shut down my videos and prevent them from archiving. It's probably targeted. But we were talking about Rodney King and the connection to Tyree Nichols' death and the beating. And then we were talking about the Alabama boat side fight with Reggie Gray and how it was reminiscent of the hitting on the head was kind of like made me think about Reginald Denny, who got hit on the head as a result of the Rodney King beatings. And we were just pointing out the connections between these various psyops, how Rodney King was hit 33 times, and Reginald Denny, again, Reginald means king, he was 33 years of age. So I'm pointing out here that there's this very consistent pattern going back. In fact, it was a 1 minute, 19-second beating on Rodney King. You'll see as we map these things out in detail. And I was doing another map that connected Godzilla with a few of the things we've been talking about, but mainly the idea of some kind of water-based sea attack involving a nuke. And it really points to Donald Trump. Like, yeah, okay, it's Russia, it's Putin, possibly Hunt for Red October, but this would somewhat imply that it's Trump's handiwork as well. Yeah, Reginald Denny, 33. AngstG says Miles Mathis calling out the Maui fires as complete CGI. Good for him. Technological dupery is their new method of land confiscation. Yeah, I thought it was remarkable how, people are thinking, well, what'd they do? Drone fires? Some kind of um, technique for, that would just roast the cars. And so people are still scratching their heads. How do they do it? And I'm questioning if there was even a fire, where they say. If it wasn't all just CGI. The way they were moving through the cars with the dead dog was, you could see the clouds and the mountains and the trees kind of moving like a video game's idea of parallax relative to the viewer, not the way things move in real life. And it was just a little too noticeable, and I just thought this has got to be just augmented virtual reality. Maybe they're actually walking somewhere, but there are these virtual artifacts everywhere, burned out cars that look like they're right out of, The Walking Dead. And maybe they don't want anyone to go, and they don't let anybody view it with drones because they don't want you to see it's just a bunch of green screens. Elephant Tusk says George Zimmerman was a psyop. Fake or not, and we'll say fake, they reveal a lot of people's real opinions. It's always interesting to see how people react to these things under the presumption that they're real. Like, I think some of it's just very distasteful, but we've talked about this before about the reality impaired pundits out there who take all the bait. And it's by design. But, the George Zimmerman event was really fascinating because you could see media manipulation real time. And at the time, I thought the stuff was real. But they try to make George Zimmerman into a sympathetic character. This wannabe mall cop. I think he was doing MMA. And I specifically recall Rush Limbaugh describing him as cherubic because he had gained a little weight. And they would always show pictures of him smiling. So they were trying to soften his image. And then at some point after, there was some fake event where George Zimmerman apparently saved a family after their SUV rolled over and it was going to blow up. And that occurred to me that, what, that could just be a publicity stunt because nobody reported on it. In fact, I think the only person who talked about it was Rush Limbaugh. Yeah, here to go. July 24th, 2013. George Zimmerman helps family out of an overturned SUV in Florida on Wednesday. No one was injured in the crash. Show me some video or it didn't happen. George Zimmerman helped rescue four. Like, this is a publicity stunt to try to turn him into a hero. I'm surprised Kyle Rittenhouse hasn't done any more heroic acts since Kenosha. Anniversary is coming up next week, by the way. Shout out to Gage Grosskreuz's arm. All right, catching up on your comments. Ears Up says hi from Hurricane Central. Yeah, I heard that Hurricane Hillary's on the way, and she's wearing the Frazzle drip mask. Whatever happened to that? The Frazzle drip story. Okay, continuing here. I didn't want to get too sidetracked with the George Zimmerman story, other than to say it really opened my eyes. And now, Jamie Foxx was instrumental in turning Trayvon Martin into this martyr, and this was something I covered in the mind map this morning. The name Trayvon and Trey and Tyree, like Tyree Nichols, and they cloned Tyrone. All of these came together in the last 6 months or so, and they're all intimately connected with this killing of the king ritual correlated with the number 33. I'm talking about the Masonic death of Hiram Abiff, which seems to be encoded into these other events we've referenced. The attack on Reginald Denny, 33. Rodney King hit 33 times. It's a really fascinating connection here. Just that how that name is being used with the They Clone Tyrone, and it stars Jamie Foxx, who is again very important figure in the BLM thing, but also Jamie Foxx in this movie They Clone Tyrone was before the movie even came out. He was suspected of being a clone. Well, what is a clone? You know, they're talking about someone who died and came back. And this central theme is the resurrection. And again, this is just their madness, not mine. We're just documenting it. Now, this is real. This is really twisted. George Magazine, we talked about this yesterday. They haven't responded yet. But George Magazine is actually producing something called George Jr. This is the QAnon magazine, like straight up Q. Like, storm the Capitol, Trump's election was stolen, Q's bringing the space aliens and med beds, JFK Jr. secretly owns us, wink wink. Yeah, them. They're targeting children, 6-year-olds. You know, cooking recipes, how to sew an American flag like Betsy Ross, why you should look up to people like Nick Fuentes because there's a lot of incels that need trad wives. I mean, it's really sick. And the person who's behind it is this person, Gene Ho, who was the Donald Trump family photographer for like 4 years straight. No, they haven't gone to baby Q yet, says Elephant Tusks. No, they're still just targeting 6-year-olds. But the fact is, it is a straight up Q magazine, pretending to be. Look, the actual Kennedy family's mad about this, but they don't know about this part of it. This is new. This just came out. Anyway, I think it's pretty twisted, and I almost don't want to talk about this other than to say just to show you because a lot of people were confused the other day when they saw this book that came out that appeared to be about the Maui fires. But the book was published like 2 days after. How did it happen so fast? People like Lauren Witzke were blown away. I saw a lot of channels were just confused, dumbfounded. They were just utterly stumped. People were stumped. Like, how did this book get out in 2 days? And I'm like, it's called ChatGPT. I could write you a book here live. In fact, I considered doing this. So I went to my ChatGPT and I asked it. No, I went to Claude AI, and I said, "Would you write me a story about George Magazine targeting children in order to recruit them into MAGA?" And here's what it wrote me. Again, this is Claude AI generated fiction. Gene Ho paced his office fretting about the future. As a publisher of George Magazine, he wanted to ensure his political party and values would endure for generations, but looking at dismal polls and projections, he feared the worst. Our core readership is getting older. We need fresh, young minds, he exclaimed. Gene had an epiphany. To save the future, he must capture the hearts and minds of children. He set to work on a new magazine prototype, George Jr., Preparing America's Youth for a Brighter Tomorrow, and the contents covered age appropriate civic lessons, patriotic songs, wholesome values. We'll hook 'em while they're young, Gene chuckled. He knew the adults worried about incels and declining birth rates. So, Gene slipped in kid friendly articles encouraging early family formation. Quote, we'll fight the incel epidemic and get these kids partnered up, he grinned. Now, Gene knew some might find his idea controversial or manipulative, but he saw it as a noble crusade to shape the next generation. Once enough kids read George Jr., he believed, they would mature into voters who would share his values, and the political future would be secured. They'll thank me someday, Gene muttered as he prepared the issue, though some might see an old man's desperate plot to brainwash kids. In his mind, this was a small price to pay to save the nation from ruin. Again, that's Claude AI generated fiction. It took 10 seconds to write that. So the idea that you could have an entire book written in 5 minutes, not a stretch. In fact, we could create fiction about every single PSYOP and put it on Kindle and probably make a lot of money because I've realized most people don't care if it's real or fake. It's based on, does it massage their cognitive bias? That's why geometry calculators are flying off the shelves. Anyway, I'd say that's a very twisted endeavor, and he should be ashamed of himself for literally doing what that fiction was describing. Like, very little difference. I think that was pretty insightful. What's crazy about it is I didn't even feed it that much in terms of background material. Now, there's a lot of coverage focusing on Mountain Dew. And it's not just the Mountain Dew Maui Blast. It's like Mountain Dew Pitch Black, Mountain Dew Deep Dive, Mountain Dew, like pretty much, I think one of them was like Blazing Hot or Solar Flare. Like there's all kinds of weapons of mass destruction, catastrophe events, all seemingly encoded into the Mountain Dew cans. And this goes back. This is Democracy Typhoon. This is a Mountain Dew commercial. This is posted by Synchromorpheus, uploaded 13 years ago. And it has what looks to be some kind of a direct energy weapon. Now, I don't really believe in the direct energy weapon explanation, even if they do exist, even if geoengineering does exist in some way. I think it's a misdirection line. All right, let's continue here. We talked about the 33-year-old behind the LA riots, talked about Reginald Denny being 33, nothing to see here. Now, this is intriguing. We talked about Oliver Anthony, and I picked up a bit of meta scripting here. So Oliver Anthony is, of course, this grassroots popular singer, but turns out he refused the $8 million record deal. And I think that he may be resenting some of the accusations that he's not entirely organic, that this is like some kind of a construct. And there has been some, I would say, some truth released on the matter. Let me go ahead and open up this tweet. Joined here by we. A most excellent evening to all. Elephant Tusk says the Mountain Dew cans are the new Illuminati playing cards. Yeah, it could be a marketing thing. Well, if it wasn't, it is now. Okay, here we go. So Jason Howerton. He is the one who promoted and helped get millions of views on this individual song. He said, new, amid endless speculation and division, ain't got a dollar. That's Oliver Anthony. Just introduced himself to the world on his Facebook page. Now, what's interesting here is he says in quotes, just like those once wandering in the desert, we have lost our way from God and let false idols distract and divide us. So in this Facebook post, which is pretty long, Oliver Anthony describes how weird it is that he's suddenly popular, that the music was just his way of, quote, dealing with his mental health and depression. He brushed off $8 million. He said, I don't want 6 tour buses, trailers, and a jet. I don't want to play stadium shows. I don't want to be in the spotlight. I don't want no agent. I'm just an idiot with a guitar. Now, on the next page, he talks about how we are, quote, just like those wandering in the desert who have lost their way from God, and let false idols distract and divide them. Now, I think this wandering in the desert thing stands out to me because this promotion of Trump to Moses, which connects to the arraignment date occurring on the assassination date of MLK, and the idea of the promised land being repackaged for the right as MAGA. I mean, we're talking about visions. Like the left has their transhumanist future, which is sustainable and all this, but the right is more traditional, and MAGA is this idea of this idealized past, and he kind of represents that. Rejection of modernity, doesn't want the money, the modern life is bad, he doesn't care about iTunes. It's to me, it's all an act. I hate to be, assuming that there's some cynical manipulation here, but we're talking about the same influencers that brought you Sound of Children. So I don't think this is 100% organic. Not saying that music's not good or whatever, that's not even the point. Like, we don't say, well, these movies are really good, so we just overlook the political utility of it. Joined here by Lando Rock, Johnny's List. Thank you for joining. Again, phones are on if you have any comments on this Oliver Anthony. A lot of people are spellbound by the music and not seeing how perfectly it ties in to this repackaging of the MAGA vision. I mean, they brought back Q a little bit with Save the Children, but they're bringing back. It's not necessarily only about Trump. Trump was just a populist to help consolidate this idea. But I drew I drew your attention to this yesterday. The idea that the quarantine is a leftist thing, and they want to hide from the anti-vaxxers and the virus, which is the modern concept of sin. COVID's the devil. They want to quarantine, and then science can save them. A lot of hand sanitizer and injections. But on the right, they don't believe in that stuff, but they still believe in the devil. And they believe that the left is basically spreading sin, social contagion. Their idea of quarantine is going rural, gardening, becoming independent of going to the cities. Try that in a small town. Get out of the cities. These are memes that have been fed steadily to the right. That Jason Aldean song is a reference to this. This idea that our country is basically overrun by commies. We need to run out into the woods. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that one side is quarantining against the other, and each side fears the other as what they think the devil is. For one, it's a literal devil, and for the other, it's a carrier of dangerous misinformation and viruses. Yeah, Lean Dion says Oliver Anthony is leading the workers' revolution. Well, he lives in Farmville, and he's a factory worker. I mean, it's just too perfect. I mean, this is central casting. Living in the old world with a no soul, with a new soul. Yeah, this is an interesting phrase too. It comports with what I've been saying. Living in the new world with an old soul. MAGA, back before Barbie was a feminist, back when she just baked cupcakes or whatever. And that's what they're hearkening back to. Why do you think the right wingers are so mad about Barbie? Why would they care? It's because of what it represents. It's a destruction of MAGA to take Barbie and make her a feminist. And I haven't seen the movie. I'm assuming she had, abortions and probably a few other things that, just totally go against the idea of Barbie as packaged originally. It's iconoclasm when they take an idol, an icon, and they destroy it. And so the right seeing these idols being destroyed, and that's why they get mad. That's why Ben Shapiro's in a tizzy. Jay Diggs says his comments look like he's trying to stoke a civil uprising revolution right before an election year. Good time to round up the dupes and silence the right. Well, I checked out his grievances about people abusing welfare and being overweight, and he didn't look too slim. And I'm not judging, but he is by his lyrics. But these are grievances. And it's like, it's grievance music. It's cool. A grievance message. Is he really aggrieved? But to sell it as, the rich are oppressing, I'm sorry, that's like a leftist position. That's a little too libertarian, a little too Occupy Wall Street. Like, it would surprise me if it surprises me that it's going well with the MAGA. Okay, we talked about the Roger Stone leak. There are no secrets anymore. It seems like everything is out. This just came out here. You know that whole conspiracy theory about 15-minute cities? They're going to start it off in Ohio.
City in the United States. He did this in his State of the City address last night.
The urban planning model is new, but city planners told our Sarah Shookman the time is now to tap into federal dollars to address some of Cleveland's deeper problems.
Imagine a Cleveland where everything you need is less than 15 minutes away.
Now, everything you need within 15 minutes. I don't know why that's such a big deal. We have convenience stores on every corner. Like there's no place in town that you need to go to. It's just a matter of choice, options. Free market, you have options. And I think that's the key here. Like to understanding the method here, what they're doing, because they want to make it seem like you're just a conspiracy theorist if you have a problem with a city that's geared for your convenience and sustainability and it's better for Gaia. But what they're ruling out is the free market, the randomness, the not that it has to be random, but do you remember in the lockdown era where they didn't want you shopping and walking back and forth down the aisles and looking at different brands and getting the best price, the best value? They wanted you to walk straight down and then turn and then go straight down, and they had arrows on the ground so you could follow those like an NPC, and you weren't supposed to go back, and people got mad if you did because NPCs don't like people getting out of line. Well, that was an affront to the idea of options, of choosing, of free market and competition determining who wins rather than the government. And what you're looking at with this 15-minute city, I think, is just this idea that you can have this perfect state planning. It reminds me of, this is classic utopianism. But the idea that they could plan it is very much like Thomas More. It's idealistic. But it's pretty much the idea that you could cookie cutter every single place and make everything fit that. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. Utopia, of course, Thomas More, 1516. He pretty much described what North Korea is supposed to look like. Just a really controlled area, very contained, limiting the amount of space every person occupies, what they can own, how many children they can have. It's pretty much like slavery is a feature of utopian life. Every household has two slaves. The slaves are from other countries, prisoners of war or poor people. Criminals are, anyway, it goes on about how they deal with every single person. I mean, it's just the whole point of it is it's tedious, top-down control. It's kind of satirical. And I think this 15-minute city thing is, I know it's not satire, but I think it's about changing the culture, just getting people to think, well, maybe we shouldn't think about driving across the country like the Griswolds. And the other part of it maybe is making travel redundant. Why would you go anywhere? Everywhere else is just like everywhere else. Jay Diggs says Alex Jones was talking about coming mask mandates this fall and how we're going to have to fight back this time. Same thing. Does anybody here care at this point? Like, do you really want to go there again? I can't imagine them actually making it work again. It just sounds like fear porn. Like, we're ready for the aliens already. Now, I could see them selling, maybe perhaps iodine and gas masks for radioactive fallout. That certainly seems to be on the agenda. The alien thing, I don't know. It could just be a cover. I don't see it really ever happening, but I'm still really suspicious. Just all these off-duty Hollywood actors. Okay, let me play this clip. This is a QAnoner who believes that Trump's going to save society. She's crying in her car. This was the crisis actor that I referred to earlier that I called out.
Let me just say this is for entertainment purposes only, and only my opinion, so that maybe TikTok will take this shit fucking down.
Now, there's a lot of hyperventilating and breathing. It takes her 3 minutes to get it out. There's no real tears, but she gets really squinty.
We're sitting here pretending like everything is fine. We're going to work and we're paying our fucking bills and paying our taxes like good.
Now, she's under the presupposition that millions of people are dying from the jab or something like that. Kind of like the guy who said that they coordinated all of the traffic lights to make sure that there's a lot of people piling up at red lights so you don't notice that everybody's dying off. Like, that's actually a conspiracy theory that they're hiding the loss of population by messing with the traffic lights. Well, here she is, crying into the camera. I didn't quite see a point, but there's a trend of people like crying about Maui in the same way, in very vague ways, not being specific about who or what they know. Well, she's getting millions and millions of hits. So this is a home run from an actress's perspective. But I actually asked her if she was a crisis actor. She said no. A lot of people disagreed on this, and we'll leave it at that for now because this is just a separate category of what I consider to be independent crisis actors. They attach themselves to events. There are plenty of them in 2021, and I consider a lot of the people who falsified symptoms, like now my arm is magnetic where I got the jab. A lot of people said that. Well, that's just basically crisis acting. Skill says aliens another lie. What the hell do you expect? Yeah, and you can't really separate the alien predictive programming from pandemic stuff or from AI. I'm actually expecting that they will have these concepts merged because I don't think they can produce it. I think Project Bluebeam is probably just a hoax. I think the most likely explanation here is they're going to complete this notion of a higher intelligence that has somehow taken up residence and can, boss us around for our own well-being. Just like the song from '69, David Bowie's Savior Machine, about handing over controls to the Savior Machine, and it's like President Joe. President Joe gives control to this thing, and I think it's just a reference to HAL 9000. And we're talking about Bowie and his whole space oddity thing as well would tie into this. Let me see if I can find that. President Joe. Because it talks about how this thing would actually save the planet. Here we go. Savior Machine. President Joe once had a dream. The world held his hand. He sold them a scheme for a savior machine. The song tells a tale in which President Joe heralds a new sentient machine called the Prayer that ends war and provides food for the people. Very prophetic. And what's interesting about this one is we had been correlating the year 1968, 69, 70 to 2020, 2021, and 20 and so on. And it was just notable that many of the influences from the late 60s, early 70s were popping up right there at 2020 and the year after. And a lot of the music too had relevant meanings, and a lot of the content film-wise specifically, like the 1973 movie Soylent Green seemed to have a lot of interesting connections with everything going on in 2021. We were just going back and forth with this, and that's when I was like looking at, hey, are they going to introduce AI, some kind of replacement for fallible human minds with this President Joe? And then he goes out to NATO, where they pray to the digital monolith, which I think is the updated version of the Georgia Guidestones. Leaders experience the digital NATO summit. It's basically the Georgia Guidestones updated for this new age. Combat climate change, it says. And it has big screens. Instead of being made out of rock, it's got screens. And as I wrote on this article about it, the occult meaning of the digital monolith, and you can watch the video where I think they're praying to it. Like, this is what idol worship looks like to me. I think this is done in public, so they're not nude, but basically, this is your leadership. There's President Joe, and this is the Savior Machine telling us what we have to do. Now, you'll notice that they're on a grid. They're all standing 6 feet apart. They're not wearing masks. But this was a really bizarre situation. This is on June 14th, 2021, Trump's birthday. Possibly the Antichrist's birthday, if you think it goes that way. I mean, there are some narrative threads that would support that. But this goes on for 2 minutes straight. They're literally worshiping this thing, or they're hypnotized. I won't make you watch the whole thing, but this is the monolith. This is Kubrick's Hell 9000 AI God. This is the savior machine, is what I'm saying. That's why when the following year the Georgia Guidestones were blown up, I thought, it doesn't matter. They've already updated them. Like, this is the Georgia Guidestones 2.0. And I'm very disappointed in those anyway. I always heard that, hey, the Georgia Guidestones will survive a nuclear holocaust. They will survive global warming. That when mankind is done killing Gaia and killing himself, any remnants will find the Georgia Guidestones and rebuild society better. We'll build back better because we'll read what these wise ones put on these stones. And then on the 6th of July, somebody blew it up with some firecrackers. And they never even caught the guy. Okay, Johan Francis says, too many people know about Bluebeam now. Now that is a very good point. Is it possible to spoil a PSYOP? It could be. But then again, Project Bluebeam is one of those leaked things. I think that was even talked about by William Cooper. And it could be one of these situations where they give you a distraction, so you're looking up and it might be something else entirely. Like, you're looking up thinking it's going to be some aerial phenomenon, when maybe the blue beam is going to be whatever they have in your hands, your phone device, that they're going to so saturate everyone's perceptions with screens that it doesn't even matter if nobody lays eyeballs on it. I mean, think about how many people actually saw the buildings on 9/11 versus those who saw it through the screen. There's a big difference. There's a huge disparity, and I think with the UFO invasion scenario, they wouldn't need very much to convince people. People want to believe. I see stickers all the time. Roswell, we want to believe. And this is because, of course, aliens are saviors to the left, to the people who believe in transhumanism, to the people who believe in the Build Back Better idea. It goes along with their ideology. Aliens are future humans, and they've transcended the world. They've transcended politics. They're gray. They're genderless. They are the product of technology as salvation to overcome all the limitations of the flesh. Just like angels, you could look at them as perfected man. But the aliens fill that role in this new updated paradigm. Skyfish says, maybe Roger Stone can pray steer the hurricane into a portal. I saw that comment and I thought you were Roger Stone trolling me. I was like, what does it mean Roger Stone can steer the hurricane? Then I remembered that for years now, Roger Stone has claimed that there is a satanic portal above the White House, and that he has been specifically not in politics for politics, but to be in the position to pray it closed. So apparently, yeah, he is the one who shut it down. He closed it. He's a prayer warrior. I think we were working on a South Pole episode about it. Great concept. Here we go. About that portal to hell hovering over the White House. Yep, Trump confidant Roger Stone says he saw a swirling portal. Prophets have told me that only prayer can close the demonic portal, swirling like a cauldron. Vivid description there. Like a swirling cauldron, like this is some Disney graphics. Where's he coming from with this? He claims the demon portal opened in early 2021. Now what's the evidence? It says here, if you thought Roger Stone was nuts, wait until you see this. This is no crazier than Ollie Alexander saying that he's a time traveler who is the American Oracle who came here to save us from the deep state. So we have the American Oracle, traveling time, Sammy Davis Jr., aka Ollie Alexander, and then his friend here, Roger Stone, who is supposedly able to shut down portals. Now, if you didn't know what the evidence, where we're getting this from, there's a 24-hour camera that you can see outside of the White House 24/7. Right Wing Watch on Twitter, longtime GOP dirty trickster Stone claims to have seen a portal. Well, there is a camera and you can see the White House, and apparently there's a glare on it. It might be from a traffic light, but that's not what he thinks. Let me go and play this clip.
Very clear. It doesn't move day or night. It's harder to see during the day, but you see it at night. And I'm absolutely convinced about the inherent, there it is again, about the inherent evil of what's going on in the White House, what's going on in the country. And I think it's imperative that people know about this, that people of good faith, that Christians know about this, and we begin a national, essentially a prayer assault to close the portal.
Has there been a national prayer assault to close the portal? Like, has that actually happened? I don't recall if that has happened. Now, this is not parody. This isn't some Alex Stein-like trick. This is a legitimate attempt to pander to Christians.
We were born for this moment.
Yeah,
I have
for sure.
believe that.
For sure.
I've been preparing this for this moment my entire life without even knowing it. I just thought I was a political warrior, but this is no longer a war in the political realm.
That's right.
And I do know how it comes out because I know how the Bible comes out. But I don't know exactly what the plan is, but I do know that closing this portal is crucial to victory.
Yeah.
And I want others to talk about it. I want others to see it. You can look.
We need some more portal truthers out there. Not enough people are talking about it. We need to start one of those trends. Why isn't anybody talking about the portal above the White House? Skyfish says the upcoming eclipse would be a perfect event to bring out the Space Brothers to show everyone they're present, like the movie District 19. Well, the story that we've been inundated with has either A, destructo aliens, or B, we're destroying ourselves and the aliens are like cosmic referees and they come down here to solve everything. Oh, good point, Lean Dion. They should ask the Q Shaman for help. I think the Q Shaman and the American Oracle and prayer warrior Roger Stone should somehow sew that portal closed. I think between the three of them they can figure out a way before Putin somehow sends a missile through CERN and it comes out of that portal. Now I sent it to Mick West and a few other people did as well, and Mick West claims it's just a glare. But who needs Occam's razor? Like, really, who needs to know? Who needs to ask? Really, does it matter what's more likely? A satanic portal or a glare? Let's just go with the more interesting and baseless explanation. Whatever massages your cognitive bias and rallies up your base. J Dig says, stuff it full of my pillows. Yeah, speaking of My Pillows, we had a skit, because we were talking about South Pole a moment ago, which is our animation. We had this skit, and it was kind of disheartening, because, here we are getting back into the swing of things, animating, and we produced this 15-minute episode about Kanye West and the My Pillow guy, where he gets Candace Owen to help him set up a deal with the pillow guy to give him all these pillowcases and then convert them in his factory into Klan hoods with swastikas on them. And this was back when he was doing the White Lives Matter, the black skinhead thing. And so we thought it was just kind of funny, yay, fashion, selling Klan hoods made from the My Pillow guy's factory. And it was like My Klan hood. And that episode was on TikTok for like 10 minutes and they banned it. But yeah, aside from Klan hoods, I can imagine My Pillows being equally useful and effective in stuffing up a satanic portal. Wayne Dion says the Occam's razor is blunt from chopping up Mentanol lines. Oh yes, QAnon Mom blocked me. My favorite fake news fabricator literally blocked me today. Oh no, it was last night. I was blocked live. Like this is becoming increasingly common, where I'm getting blocked in the middle of live streams. But then today, and I think this is great because I just bragged about how my blocked list is like epic, and I wish I could print out every blocked notice and make wallpaper out of it. And then all of a sudden, Elon Musk comes out and he's like, "We're getting rid of the blocking feature," meaning you won't be able to block people anymore. And a lot of people are crying about it. A lot of people are threatening to leave again, like rage quitting. But think about all the people who are able to dodge accountability, trolls, government stalkers, etc. All right, let's continue here. I'm going through my ips.monster. This is the main site, or infiniteplainsociety.com. I posted a couple articles here. I'm still waiting to see if I'm right about this theory I have about the airplane freakout lady. And if you haven't seen that, the basic theory is that the Tiffany Gomez airplane freakout was really just a reenactment of the intro scene to Final Destination from 23 years prior. And if you've seen the movie or you've seen the intro, it's there. And the movie is weirdly encoded with the number 23. And that number, there's a couple other movies that use that, like Jeepers Creepers. Every 23 years, the monster comes back. So that number seems to be relevant here because here we are 23 years later, and they're doing a reboot of the entire series. So they're starting over. And the whole thing is about cycles and everything. So I'm convinced here, I've kind of convinced myself that Tiffany Gomez, marketing executive freaking out on TMZ and getting all this attention, is actually doing some kind of a PR stunt. At least that's my guess based on available evidence. A lot of people are convinced she's a clone or a deep fake. Some think she doesn't even exist. Others say you shouldn't even pay attention to it, like it's not worth paying attention to. And to that I would say, why isn't it worth paying attention to? The whole purpose of media deconstruction is situational awareness and knowing what the public is believing. So it's relevant to my interests to know what toxins are flowing through their minds, what mind junk is bouncing around in there by design. And in this case, there's a reason why people are shown a lot of people freaking out in subways, on planes. There's a reason for it. What that reason is, we're not quite sure 100%, but the fact is there's a predictive programming value in this particular situation. The Autohoaxology 101 has been ordered. I ordered the first batch of 10. The preview copies up there. I don't have the real cover art, which won't be publicly viewable it won't be viewable until the 23rd, which is the actual publication date. So this book is a crucial part of the larger IPS mission. It's kind of a cornerstone for this parallel media, and it needed to be done. We needed a hardback book to explain the core concepts here. So if someone wants to mischaracterize or say you're crazy, it's like, well, no, actually, we have reasons and a basis for every claim that we make. Skill says Hillary is not a tropical storm. California is not in the tropics. Good to know. The thing is, when it comes to fakeability, like obviously they can't fake hurricanes. They don't control the weather. They'd like you to think they can. But what they can do is they can be very, we'll just say, liberal with their interpretation of what's actually going on. And that's a pretty common thing. And there's a lot of predictive programming, a lot of this stuff that just makes people believe it, that they're actually messing with the weather. And I tend to think it's all mind war stuff. But people arrive at these things because they have bad representation. You try to find people who know what's going on, and they all lead people into rabbit holes like this. From Maui, watch Dew in action destroying buildings, dry roasting residents, and more. Is there any doubt that the American government is using taxpayer money to kill Americans and steal their land? This is a typical red pill perspective, that a bunch of people got zapped. that they did the Maui blast. And this is exactly what I mean when I say that if you drift away from the blue pill dream world, where you just blame climate change, you go into the nightmare turf, where your interpretation of reality is way different. They think it was nature, negligence, and man being lazy and destructive. But then the fringe, if you go a little further out, they have this science fiction horror movie scenario where a bunch of people got lasered and a bunch of children got zapped. It's just a dog got killed. Totally insane. But it's a nightmare. It's a nightmarish concept. I'm going through your comments. If you want to call in and talk about opening portals or any of that, feel free, but keep it clean. Okay, we'll continue here. Outside the White House, this is someone who could be recruited by Roger Stone to help shut down some of these portals. This is Tim Sheets, and he believes that there are these things called breakthrough angels who will destroy Baal. That there's going to be a merger of heaven and earth, and we're going to see a bunch of angels come down to work with the Magas.
We pray, Lord, that the cleansing of iniquity would go forth across this park into the White House and strike those iniquitous roots of Baal that are there.
Of Baal. So go zap Baal in the White House.
We fuel the efforts of seraphim that are battering them and shattering them, and the breakthrough angels that you promised would be present to break up, break out, and break through. Break up the efforts of Baal in this city, and we declare in Jesus' name.
Well, if you want to break down the influence of Baal in D.C., you're going to have to do something about that 666-foot stone obelisk, the Washington Monument. Now, getting back to the comments, someone said something interesting. Skill. I appreciate this point here. He said, posting fake videos of lasers gets the guilty culprits off free. Yes, if you are carrying a guardrail, a second shooter, a false flag, some kind of science fiction made up weapon to explain what you can't explain, you are carrying water for the mainstream media and hiding the hoax. You're being used. So you're either a dupe or an agent. And one of the purposes to getting the textbook out is once this information is pretty well saturated through the quote red pill communities, we'll say, people will have no excuse for continuing to carry water for these alternative narratives that are actually there to preserve the Psywar as constructed. You know, if you're a conscientious objector to psychological warfare, you're going to see the sense in what we're talking about with this changing your frame of reference when it comes to processing media. Look, this is difficult to overstate what we're actually describing here, because a lot of the lying is by omission more than commission, and a lot of it is lying to oneself, or rather having one's thoughts steered by a false starting point, loaded questions, and it's pretty insidious. It's why they start when you're very naive and young. All right, continuing here. Appreciate the shop sale, Jay. I think there's a few copies left if anybody wants to get the textbook in hardback, the next batch. Only 20 available. All of them will be signed. Once I've gone through this copy and I've checked it through it and make sure everything's perfect, then I'm going to order in volume, and those will be made available through eBay. But again, this book is not entirely new to anyone here for the most part, but if you think about it, we talk about this stuff all the time. We refine our approaches, we test, we apply this information, and we kind of determine, what exactly are we looking at when we talk about propaganda, perception management, etc., and we kind of fine-tune things. And it's not enough to just fine-tune things and to keep going. I think it's important to blaze a trail, and at a minimum, to put any of the valid ideas, the various heuristics out there that others can use. For example, the fakeability test, the question of fakeability, and how the general public doesn't know what fakeability actually means when it comes to nightly news, because they don't know how nefarious, insidious, and how deceitful media actually is. And naivety, ignorance is not really an excuse. And I'm not here trying to wake people up or whatever. Blue pillars can have their dream. I care less. But I'm more interested in people who are actively engaged in mass media analysis and deconstruction, simply because we have plenty to suggest that they're bending our news. That news is not what people think it is. And this is far beyond conspiracy theory. I'm starting to see, too, that many conspiracy theories, if not all of them, are purposefully planted, low-hanging fruit, truther bait, stuff that is there not necessarily to distract, but to get people to form communities around agents who can then be manipulated as groups. And the red pill thing is a perfect example. It's not what it was when it used to just be an analogy, a metaphor. The whole idea is now completely grafted onto the big government psychological operations like Q, and attached to politics and characters like Trump. And then if you're into that stuff, you get blamed, you get censored because you're targeted, guilt by association. You can look at the whole Q movement as an attack on the conservative right by basically smearing anybody on that side of the aisle with this insanity. It's mind-blowing how he is given this platform like he's some kind of credible voice to listen to, when half of the stuff he talks about is futuristic sci-fi, Tesla, essentially magic and time travel. Okay, Ringer is back on. I apologize if you try to call in. I saw the number pop up, but I didn't catch it on time. I'm monitoring again. Now, I've been watching this show called Feria, The Darkest Light on Netflix, and after a couple of episodes, I started to detect what I felt was like a very strong Gnostic subtext. But then the numbers were so consistent with the stuff we're always talking about and seeing. For example, this old man's in a cave since 1942. 33 years later, his daughter goes in to bring him out. This 42 and 33, the association of being in the cave and going to the light. 42 being consistently associated with descent and darkness, the earth. A cave is within the earth. And then, of course, 33, light and the ascent. Like Mach 33 is the speed it takes you to escape Earth's gravity. Well, this idea in this movie is based on this cult. And this whole cult is a Gnostic cult. The lexicon is there. They describe the demiurge as some kind of blind idiot that isn't the real creator, but is responsible for the realm that we're in, and how we are stuck in an endless cycle of birth, life, death, rebirth. And this cult was attempting, and I haven't finished the series, but their attempt is to transcend the material realm, to escape the cycle of death, reincarnation, and enter this place they refer to as the kingdom, where they don't have to go through the inconvenience of the intermittent deaths and the amnesic walls between lives. Fascinating material, but what's most interesting about it is that it's on Netflix, and it's not even trying to be all that indirect. Like, they're just indoctrinating people is what I'm saying. I feel like I'm watching a documentary, like how to start a sex cult, and that's pretty much what it is. Infinite Plane Radio.
Greetings. This is Lickety Split. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well here. Just talking about satanic portals above the White House and breakthrough angels going into battle for the MAGAs.
Yeah. Okay, just really quick, but you were just talking about that show or whatever, which is interesting because I was just reading in my little dictionary thing, and I think it was the definition of like magic or something related, obviously. It's the Magician's Dictionary, so you would assume. But so I was just reading, and it said that there's the black magic and there's white magic and that there's yellow magic. And it actually said that black magic was associated with people that believed in that whole, you're stuck in the cycle of rebirth and how you have to break it, and that's like the pain. Life is pain, sorrow, which is also like akin to Buddhism, also mostly, or I'm sure certain types, and there might be other types of Buddhism too. But so that would be associated, and that was like I think that was the black magic, and that none of these colors like associate really with good or evil. This is just for the sake of classification. But and that white magic was the opposite, that you can find joy and happiness and all this shit. I think they would also compare Freemasons to that, where Freemasons aren't locked in that world anymore of recycling and rebirth, but have made it to, where you're the creator, you're the top notch guy or whatever. And then it said oddly that yellow magic was the non-interfering magic, except for keeping black magic and white magic from destroying each other. But other than that, that yellow magic would never destroy.
Interesting theme
never
there.
intervene.
Yeah, the light versus dark, the Star Wars stuff. This is also pretty big with Theosophists, or even the basis for the Q cult, that Church Universal Triumphant, like the white hats. The white hats comes from that.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
so it's like white hats and black hats, and this is just an updated version.
Or I wonder if the white hats would be like the yellow magic, where you're trying to keep the two other assholes from destroying each other for whatever reason, but that really seems like the most like manipulative, like, that's like the yellow one wants the black and the white to keep fighting each other. So I don't know who exactly that would fit, characteristically speaking, but maybe there's a white hat, black hat, and some other fucking hat. Who fucking knows?
Okay, now in your
But
opinion,
anyway, that was just.
Okay, one question. Your opinion, Donald Trump, is he Christ or the Antichrist? Like, in your opinion, is he more of a Christ or more of an Antichrist based on your...
Or is he one of these yellow ones now that I was just talking about? Like, which, it sounds, like I said, it sounds just as dickheaded as the other one, that you want to keep the two from destroying each other, but you want to keep them fighting each other instead. And that's what it said at the end, was because otherwise, once they destroy each other, God forbid they come after you, the yellow, because they have no more enemy, whoever wins the fight between black and white. So, and that could, I guess, like, I've been fucking reading Donnie Dark and shit a lot, which I don't totally agree with entirely because it's so, like, too biblical and revelation-y. But, he does talk about, there's two beasts that are there and a harlot, which would be three parties, just like the black, the white, and the yellow is a three-party system.
Well, yeah,
going.
Donnie Darkened is intriguing, and I prefer to just take the facts and wait for a conclusion, because my take on it is that if you have a puzzle and you already have the full picture, anything that doesn't fit that is just somehow going to conveniently not be in it, or it's going to be excluded.
Right.
And I think that a lot of them have that filter of, oh, it's going to be like this, and it's like, well, let's just examine what's there, because what's there is interesting enough without this desire for it all to come to end next week so you can say I told you so.
Yeah, right. More specifically, it's the revelation, like, that this revelations is the plan, and we're just going along with it. Like, okay, that's fucking stupid.
I've given up.
Give me a break.
I've given up any hope whatsoever or expectation that Trump is anything other than a scripted character with very little leeway and insulated. We're talking decades of predictive programming, but it's pretty saturated with a combination of Antichrist and this overt attempt to Christify him. And it's fascinating to me how they're using these powerful religious archetypes in politics, and the believers are not even seeing it. They're too busy.
Well, that's because this is like these are the ones that would have written revelations into the Bible on purpose. Like, it's just like a matter of seniority. Like, who's the oldest ones here? The occult people or the Christians? And obviously, like, the occult's older, so they're the ones that would be writing all this stuff into play and playing it out. It's like a grand scheme, and it could be done. Like,
well, the Bible,
you could definitely get people to go along with shit for 2,000, 3,000 years.
Yeah, I think it's like the old the old school fake news. It's the old meta script that was used as the template for their bigger story. Like, there's no difference, if you ask me, between the old flood myth and the new flood myth. These are constructs that are used to
Right.
keep the sheeple in line, and it works. They shake down people over the expectation that
Yeah.
the sky is going to fall if they don't comply. I mean, they have this down to an art form.
And I think what I've heard the analogy of that would be is knowing the proper mixture for the best brick to build the house. You know, it's somebody has one recipe to make a brick and your glue's not that good and it's going to fall apart eventually, or you have the better recipe for brick making and then you stack them and make a house. And of course, like related allegedly to like Freemasonry stuff or whatever, but who knows actually if that is.
Um,
But
Now, I was going to watch some
go ahead.
movies to do some reviews. Have you watched and reviewed? Have you seen Barbie yet? I'm assuming you have.
No, I haven't. I need to, but
Now, did you
I did
see?
just come across something else.
Okay, but related. Did
Go
you see
ahead.
that Margot Robbie was actually in the movie Babylon before that? What do you think of that?
I did see somebody mention that, and that's interesting because I just read also in my book while I was going through it today that, so I guess Babylon is also a fire elemental. So like, just everything kind of crosses into, can be classified into all various things. So I guess that's more like an alchemy thing or something. But so I guess Babylon would be a fire elemental also, which is interesting considering what's on the news right now, all that kind of shit. And, some other things that Oppenheimer and that and all together, Maui, like everything together. It's like a super, super like meta script, like there's multiple levels
Oh yeah,
of
today.
these scripts that they're releasing.
Today we were talking about this live, and the thing got deleted, but my stream got nuked. But the next Godzilla movie coming out on 11/3 has. I haven't even seen commercials for it, trailers yet, but just the timing of it tells you that it ties into Oppenheimer, it ties into the nuke scenario,
Hmm.
and it ties into the Kraken, and it ties into Trump, and it all is based on the fact that Godzilla was born on 11/3, which is the election day, the Kraken day, and this is the 69th anniversary. 69 is the crab, which is associated with the day we went into Cancer when the submersible, the Titan, went down. And so the Titan, of course, the Titanic, that
Right.
site is the
Right.
deep sea Challenger at the Titanic. It's all a reference to Abaddon or the Apollyon, but basically the beast in the sea. And that would also indicate this Kraken or Godzilla, which again, it's the 33rd Godzilla movie in the franchise. It's the 37th total. I mean, every number there is just correlating. And then finally, what created Godzilla? The nuclear tests.
Right. Now, so this was interesting is that like fire we talked about the other day, like usually is knowledge, but with regards to this Babylon and Oppenheimer and all this, I guess within if you're within the scope of say like Gnosticism or OTO, that could also knowledge or fire would represent blood also. So I thought that was interesting that you can kind of classify these things into different meanings and it could affect things, but we're definitely talking about like meta script, and there's definitely all these layers to all this kind of stuff
Well, sure, at the
for
very base
sure.
level, you have the solar story, and then the story of night and day and their fight. But then you have the four seasons, and that's where you get your fire, water, earth, air, and how they personify these. Like Rihanna in the last Super Bowl with the pregnant belly, all the red, the moon goddess symbolism.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the goddess is
yes.
the heart or the chalice, and that all that heart stuff
And
like
there you
Damar
go, and the
Hamlin.
blood.
Yep.
Yeah, blood, exactly. And also he said, and this isn't from my book, it was that the fact that you have BABA, a double Baba, Babylon, people still think that there's a Babylon with a Y. No, we're talking BABA. Obviously that was Crowley for, he said like numerical reasons or something is why it got Babylon. But that
Typical.
also this repetition of BABA
Look,
is also having to do a double symbolism type of thing. double wanded, he said, or double path and double wanded or something like that.
But there's definitely
So
this
yeah,
case, though.
that's
I see it all the time where Gematria people, even Crowley, will be like, well, this doesn't perfectly fit. Let's just change one letter. It's like, that's
yeah.
cheating. That's cheating.
Right. And I mean that can go back to even like John Dee wasn't a lot of his was like based on numbers and like 7 star, 7 pointed star, and
But
all these people get into numbers a lot, but
but look, it's
there's like
it's
the neo, like newer stuff and older stuff. But
yes. There's a lot of new calculators, but overall, the theory behind it, though, is not just about bias confirmation and making numbers match. The way that they use it,
right,
the way they use it in public and in their open magic ritual is the idea is that you're like the I guess the stereotype is you want to put a hex on somebody. You get a picture of them, you poke a needle in it or something like that. And but you have to make the
right,
association between your hate, the needle, and the person. So you create these associations symbolically, and the idea is that this synchronistic association, if it's somehow done right, the idea is that you're supposed to cause these things to occur. Well, this is their theory. Magic in Theory and Practice, Magic Without Tears. She talks about this
right.
stuff. So if you're
Well,
taking
yeah.
the names that have these numerical values, it's because you're trying to more or less, I guess, coerce an outcome by sympathetic
Okay.
magic is what they call it.
Right, which is also like I was seeing as like geomancy also, where you're building things in alignment with the stars above, and you're hoping to mimic them and then possibly manipulate them to your better or whatever. But I mean, that's all just kind of similar idea that they all share, I suppose. But
Well,
all
people,
right, then this other thing was the portal. Oh, go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead.
well, this ties into that because on 8/8, that was the Lionsgate portal, and that's when the Orion's belt aligns with Sirius. And a number of people remarked on,
Okay,
oh, that's interesting because that's when the fires started. And the 8/8, it's area code 808. Maybe there's something there because the O would probably signify portal. But
right. Or if you were doing sex magic, you would do your sex part of it with aligned with these portals that are being opened in the cosmos. Is that how that would work, or
that's part of it. And I
something
believe
like that?
I believe Babylon might even mean, doesn't it mean gateway?
I'm not sure.
Because the idea, like
Probably.
for example, the goddess and
It
their
still
little
talks about old Babylon. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well,
Go ahead.
the goddess in their little ceremony, their priestess, they call her Babylon because she's a portal through which they would be bringing forth the energies of the Antichrist. That was their
Oh,
story,
okay. Right.
and
Right.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
they said that she's a like a living, the goddess is a living gateway, or the magician, whoever's channeling. And so the meaning of the word Babylon, I want to see if I can find it, but yeah, the association here, of course, is that she's the gateway.
Right, and that kind of is like there was recently that Beyonce stage where it was pretty much legs spread, and it was like a portal in the background.
Oh
Who
yes,
else?
yes,
Travis Scott,
Travis
right?
Scott, and
Yeah.
no,
Beyonce had one. Yeah.
Yeah, Beyonce had a big
Beyonce
portal
too.
that looked like legs that were open, and then Astro World, Travis Scott had the big portal, and then Travis Scott just went and Ye was there to the Valley
And can
of
you
Giza.
imagine just being
They went to the
like an NPC, like you're just at that concert, just total NPC, and you're just like, cool, fucking leg spread and vagina, like
no, but
that's
listen though,
awesome. Like,
listen,
how
they
many people actually knew? Go ahead.
but Travis Scott though, Mr. Astro World, went to Egypt
Yeah.
at the pyramids, which correspond to Orion's belt and the portal with the Lionsgate
Right. Right.
alignment. So there's kind of a tie-in there. And then, of course, the name Babylon, it means gate of the gods.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. And is there also, I guess, like Babylon, the land that fell? I suppose, like it's like more like secondarily like related. It's not like really
Babel,
like a
Babel, the
definitive part of
capital,
it.
still means a singular gate of God. And these are
Yeah.
all again. The reason why this is even significant is that in the New Age religion, they've renamed their gods and goddesses, and Babylon's the new one. And that strange little ceremony that we reference often with Crowley's buddy Jack Parsons has everything to do with our space age religion and how they've
Right.
updated this system for this new era. But anyway,
Now,
go ahead.
I go ahead. So then, what do you think about like the Avengers and that whole series and like how at the end like they're fighting the aliens coming out of the portal? Do you think they're trying to signify something at all about that, like deep symbolism, or is that just like just fun comic book portal aliens coming out of it?
Interesting question.
Or
I'll have to think about that because the whole idea of aliens coming from other planets is patently ridiculous, but the portal thing seems very popular. And of course, you have the Donnie Darko movie is all about a portal, and it was also symbolically the corona was some kind of a quote portal, the sun and the moon, and yeah, there's obviously something there. And by the way, the guy who
yeah,
directed Donnie Darko, his dad worked for NASA, which is notable because that movie contains predictive programming for 9/11 and 3/11.
right. Interesting. All right. Well, yeah. Sorry, I trying to be quiet here, like my kid's sleeping. So,
Sure. All right. Well, thanks for the
yeah,
call. Have a great night.
absolutely.
All right. Well, if his kid's in hearing range, he's gonna have some strange dreams. Appreciate the call. We're talking about the religion that runs the world. We got there because it started off with Roger Stone talking about the need to form some kind of prayer alliance to close satanic portals above the White House. And this topic of portals somehow blended into this other area, but all very much relevant. And here you have right wingers outside of the White House praying for breakthrough angels to destroy the iniquitous roots of Baal.
That the lordship of Jesus and his kingdom will extend throughout this city and throughout this land. Hell is not going to stop it. It is time for the rollout of the kingdom of Almighty God at levels that have never seen before. It is time for the merger of heaven with the earth realm. It's time for the merger of angel armies and the remnant warrior armies in the greatest campaign earth has ever seen. And we say in Jesus' name, let the rollout begin.
Okay, let the rollout begin. Isn't that a Walmart thing? That's roll back. Now, the other day I was talking about how they have these engineered culture wars and how it's so predictable, how Walmart is right wing and Target is left. Target has Starbucks, and there's this back and forth. Well, not coincidentally, Ben Shapiro was talking yesterday about how much money Target has lost because of their forays into the culture war in the last year. Just pointing it out that the right will gloat over Target losing money, and it's just another one of these examples of how they really just bifurcated this society mentally. It's incredible. Okay, going through some comments. Elephant Tusk says, I believe that 2030 is their backup plan. Lickety Split says, call your. Yeah, he's inviting Elephant Tusk to call in. And if you want to call in, it's 505 349 0420. All right, let's continue. We talked about the 15-minute city, which they say it's nothing to be afraid of, and I'm saying, well, it's no scarier than any other utopian scheme. I mean, is it any different than the workers' paradise? The whole point of it is, do you really want their opinions on how you should live? These are the COVIDiots. Okay, Maui Burst. And there you have it, Maui Burst. We're looking at the different flavors. Mountain Dew Baja Blast. Baja Blast. Dew with a blast of natural. Hillary Hurricane Major Threat to Baja California. Again, predictive programming all over the Mountain Dew cans. What does that mean? It means that, if anything, that they put as much effort and money and marketing into the alternative narrative as the mainstream. They do control both sides. left and right. Well, they control all sides, left, right, and fringe. The only side they don't control would be outside, and that would be us. Okay, we have more Antichrist talk. This is Lance Wallanu. I listened to this guy earlier. He was at church, and somebody whispered in his ear and told him that the Antichrist is coming after Trump's next election, but it's not Trump, it's somebody after Trump. But before he could figure out who it was, he had vanished into thin air. I'm assuming it was Jesus, but let's take a listen.
Great statesman down there. And I had my eyes closed. And a man came up to me out of nowhere and whispered in my ear. He said, Brother Lance, I believe the Lord has a word for you. God wants you to know Donald Trump will be elected for one more term.
Yeah, so God sent an angel. I mean, look, there are people in need. There are people dying. There are people hanging on the edges of cliffs, literally. But no, he sent somebody to tell MAGA cultist Lance Wallanu that Trump's going to win. I mean, that's some important insight there. I mean, I guess we're going to need a New Testament to include this particular bit of prophecy. Very deep. Goes a little further, a little bit of hopium, but again, this is a fake story, and I'm just pointing it out that this is lying. He doesn't believe this.
And after that, there shall be this great distress of nations. The Antichrist and those forces will not be able to emerge before their time. And there's one more term of mercy for America. Whispered it in my ear. By the time
All right, so some spirit whispered it in his ear. Trump's going to save us for 4 more years. So if you were scared about the Antichrist, don't worry. You get one more term where Trump's going to hold him back. Unbelievable how they just grift like this. It's beyond pandering. It's mind control at this point. Trump has canceled his scheduled press conference on Monday. His lawyers stopped him. He was going to go on TV and talk about how the election was stolen, but he withdrew. Not going to happen. Pizzagate is back.
Exploitation, just ask Liz Crokin, right? And there's a reason for that, because unfortunately, this extends into the halls of power. That means police officers, schools, nurses, hospitals, lots of people in our community that are involved in the trafficking of kids, even people.
This is Laura Logan, and this is fascinating because, you know, we've all heard this before. We've heard about QAnon, traffic of children. We've heard this from the 80s, Satanic Panic. This is not a new story, but it's not merely a repackaging of blood libel because of anti-Semitism. It's much bigger than that. The purpose is this. I talked about earlier how the right-wing quarantine is going rural, going into your own little small towns. The purpose of which is to get away from the left and their sin and their devil, their satanic lifestyle, their transhumanism, their futuristic, transhumanistic utopia. You want to go back to where it was, like Oliver Anthony, you're a old soul in a new world, so you want to make America great again like it used to be. So you go back traditional. So you have this traditional versus progressive dialectic that they've set up. And the right quarantines against progressivism. The left quarantines against anti-vax from the religious right and their mind viruses. Well, just as the left is cowed by the pandemic, whereas the right is out there protesting, what cows the right? It's the moral panic-demic. They use moral panic the same way you would use a virus, and it's for the same purpose, to get each side to want to segregate from the other, and then everybody goes into their respective bunkers. And it works. So the satanic panic, in other words, and the root word panic is very significant here, pandemic. We're talking about the idea of some kind of contagion that the other guys are carrying because they don't want to take your prescribed cure, you know, baptism or vaccine. So this is just more left-right agitation, and that's why they are shopping this around. It's not because it's real. Into the Break says too much astral projection causes brain bleed. Yep. Now, is the astral plane flat, is my question. And how fast do you have to go to get there? They say you got to go Mach 33. That's escape velocity if you want to get out of Earth, but to get to the astral plane. And again, plane signifies flat. Is it a plane on top of the ball? Does the ball rotate beneath it? I'm very curious about how a astral plane works with a ball Earth. A prophetic intercessor warns that America is in a 40-day war with the spirit of Jezebel. And Jezebel is also embodied in Barbie, obviously. This is why you have these preachers, they're literally taping Bibles to baseball bats and destroying Barbie houses. But let's go ahead and listen to this about how Trump is being attacked by Marxist witches.
And I'm not, again, it's not about a woman. It's about something that seduces servants into sexual immorality. It's something that destroys the foundation and persecutes the church. The spirit that's coming from that whole Democratic Party right now is an antichrist spirit that actually agrees with the shedding of innocent blood up to the point of birth. Brothers and sisters, this is not normal. I feel right now what's going on in America over President Trump, revelation and understanding that we've gotten concerning witchcraft that's going on in America.
All right, Marxism and witchcraft and demonic spirits.
Demonic spirits.
Now again, these may be valid claims. I don't know. I haven't seen any demonic Marxist witches lately. But I will say that this is very typical of the moral panic-demic that I'm talking about, that their side is spreading it. He's not worried about Republicans and demons and witchcraft. No, it's only coming from Democrats because witchcraft is a left-wing only thing. It's like, it's built this way. Wicca is ecofeminism. It's the goddess against the patriarchy. It's more mind control programming. If you really get into it, Wicca is a creation of Aleister Crowley and Gerald Gardner, a couple of Masons. Alright, continuing. Elephant Tusk says, I don't even believe in objective reality at this point. Everyone lives in their own astral node. Now, that's an understandable perspective. It really is. My take on it is that the world stage is the agreed upon mental construct. It's our consensus interpretation. But there is an objective reality. But they don't want you to focus on it because that's where they get the real power. They can't take your land as easily. They can't take your property as easily until they can disabuse you of the idea of owning it or even being desirous of being of the world. And the idea of shrinking your vision down to a 15-minute city, it sounds kind of convenient, but ultimately it's about distracting you from the wider world, in my opinion, for the idea of saving the planet, which is being altruistic, self-sacrificing. But I think objective reality is real, and that's what they're trying to distract us from by allowing us enough leeway to each descend into our own subjective interpretation. You can have Mandela affected next to Christians, next to people who believe that climate change is ending the world, to people who think everything is fine and always will be, and they all coexist. We all coexist, despite having completely different internal mental constructs, as long as we have the same basic agreements on the big pictures. But I think that's what this age is about. The age of Aquarius is the deluge of information which is intended to make individual facts irrelevant. Like, they won't mean anything. Oh, here's a fact. Joe Biden's an animatronic. Well, if that's true, and you could prove it, it doesn't mean anything because there's no context today. This is why we have built this parallel media. This parallel media is going on. It's going to be continuing on indefinitely, but the purpose of it is you have to have a context where your facts matter on a timeline, where they can be verified. and you can build patterns, and you can actually, you know, get an idea of where we were, where we are, where it's going. But if we try to maintain a record in their ecosystem, it will continually be deleted because they have a complete closed system. The puzzle is complete. There's no pieces extraneous to it that they'll accept. Even though they forced it, and it looks pretty bad. They force fit 90% of the puzzle pieces to artificially constrain the size of it, but people accepted it, and now they're shrinking the universe day by day. They live in a shrinking universe. The other day, almost as a joke, NASA's James Webb Telescope claims that they saw I guess it was a orange question mark at the edge of the universe. Looks like cheesy poofs, but the question mark at the edge of the universe, kind of fascinating because I've been talking about that for some time. I've been saying that the main disagreement worldview-wise between those who believe the official version and those who are questioning NASA's interpretation is how far away is the question mark? Where does our knowledge end and ignorance begin? Is it 500 light years away? Do we know everything in between here and there? Or is it a few thousand miles away? And that's the main thing, I think, is the worldview warfare is about constraining your vision. And a large part of it, I think, is restricting your sense of how much time is left. That's why every single cult is end times. Okay, continuing. Elephant Tusk says, if you possess the divine spark, which is what Gnosticism suggests, then you are your own creator. That sounds similar to what is being talked about in this movie I'm watching, Feria, the Darkest Light, but it's a Gnostic story. It's this Gnostic cult, but they claim that there are three types of people. Somatics, who cannot be saved. Psychics, who are worldly but can be brought into the light. And the perfect ones, who are already ascended spirit above the material, above the flesh. And the perfect ones, they're saying, are closest to the truth about this reality and how it's actually a false, illusory construct by some blind idiot demigod or demiurge that is something to be overcome, not to be worshipped, although most people mistakenly worship it. And I think there's a lot of validity to what I'm seeing in this series. It's fascinating because it seems to make a lot of sense in a few different ways, because it's so consistent with what I see in all the rituals in plain sight and my own studies. It just seems like, okay, this is a very informed script. I'm not sure where it ends yet. But light is a very important concept as a symbolic representation of consciousness, darkness being ignorance. This is the core of the Masonic initiation and every other initiatory society, where you're brought in with a bag over your head symbolizing darkness. You know, they pull the wool over your eyes. That's a reference to the hoodwink. And the hoodwink represents the darkness that the world outside the temple, who don't have the light, exist within. So if you're not in the temple, you're considered to be hoodwinked. You have wool over your eyes. And doesn't that describe the world? That only the people who have been given certain security clearance have knowledge, which again is the symbolic meaning of light. And the people outside with the hoodwinks are believers. They can't necessarily know real from fake. They just have to selectively choose on their own personal proclivities what they want to believe, because it's totally subjective. It's called the wilderness of darkness. And the new candidates are brought in to see the light, if they're worthy. But it describes a two-tiered society of initiates and outsiders. And the outsiders are fools. At least that's what I gather based on the way they're represented in the litany. It's not an open source open platform. It's a closed system, hierarchical, compartmentalized. Elephant Tusk says Maxwell talked about knowers versus believers. Really? See, that's great because and I'll have to find some of his discussion about this because I believe that's the principal distinction to be made here. That we're not talking about right or wrong political opinions, etc. We're talking about whether you know or believe. And this is such an important distinction, but it's lost in the world of believers. And what they're doing now with the inundation of mis and disinformation and clickbait is they're diluting information. It's a dilution. That's what the flood means. 212816 says, I'm just up late, been listening for quite a while. Thank you for joining. Yeah, we just turned on the live stream here about maybe 90 minutes ago, a couple hours ago. But the 24/7 stream was already on. Now, the believer knower thing is key here, and it's a big part of the autohoaxology text, because the way I'm describing it is that the pyramid, if you want to describe it as a pyramid, consists of the people who are maintaining the structure at various levels of awareness about what they know at the top. The bottom doesn't know anything. They just believe. And these beliefs are subjective and they can fight over them all day as long as they don't leave the parameters defined by the stage. The knowers, the ones who are in the know, would be the perpetrators of the Psywar. And the higher you go, the more you would have to be aware. I don't think just because you know that they fake mass shootings, you would necessarily have to know that space is fake, although there are some people that cross those lines. Senator, I believe it was the astronaut, is it Mark Kelly? Astronaut becomes a senator. His wife is participating in a fake shooting with Gerald Loeffner, whose face is obviously based on Glenn Beck. Hilarious inside joke there. But he was behind all three curtains. But it's compartmentalized. And what's so fascinating about this is we are apprised of information that people don't get until they've clawed up the pyramid half their lives and sacrificed how many babies. I mean, who knows what they have to do? Or who or what? I mean, it's just like, it's the Illuminati dung heap. You know, it's a small world. It's a very small group of people at the top. And they fight, obviously, at some level there's competition, I imagine, just to get to know this stuff, to be a part of it, or to be useful enough. And here we are, openly sharing all this information that is kept from everybody all the way up the pyramid. Like, what I mean is, like, a lot of the bottom rung reporters and journalists, they're insulated. They don't know. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that we grew up in a doomsday cult. You may not look at it that way, but it's an absolute fact. The type of mind control programming that you see in groups can be applied to masses, and you can also apply this same personality dynamics between the individuals and groups and how the media writ large communicates to the viewer. It sets up a certain dynamic. And I'm just saying that most of the people up this pyramid would really not know how fake it all is. And that's kind of a big deal. Like, think about this. The fakeability of nukes is an important point. Most people don't know it's fakeable. As a general rule, if you can fake it in the movies, you can fake it on the news. It's actually that simple. But most people don't know it's fakeable. But the fact that they were able to convince people of it put everyone in the world in this mutual hostage situation where the most powerful people in the world can now literally destroy it. And we're at their mercy. And this has created, over the generations, a bit of Stockholm syndrome. People are in love with their captors because their missiles are bigger than their missiles. But we're looking at mass Stockholm syndrome by design. And it's no different than the way that religions have traditionally cowed populations, controlled populations. Cults. My third eye says all the most important information is compartmentalized. Exactly. Definitely the case. And it's for their own good. Like, do you think if Neil deGrasse Tyson knew space was fake, he would be able to lie so convincingly? No, he's what I would call an unwitting liar, or an honest liar. And this is going to be part of Autohoaxology 102, which will be probably next year. But I've been really doing a lot of work and thought has gone into just kind of examining what we mean when we say lie and liar. And at what point are you culpable for lying unwittingly? And we're in an age where, ignorance is pretty much the norm, or it's forgivable. I think people are in their own little bubble realities, and if they're not aware of something, if they don't have all the information, if they don't have time to research it, maybe it's not their fault. They don't know that they're just spreading institutionalized lies. But my point being, for their own good, they wouldn't be apprised of certain things that might make it a conflict of conscience to continue to promulgate it. Rachel Macaskill says, morning IPR. I've been saying that for years. If they can make movies, they can make reality on the news. Yeah, that's the big paradigm shift. And this is what 9/11 teaches us, if nothing else, that there is a monolithic control over mass media that can be exerted at any time. And it means centralized creative control. And for all intents and purposes, 9/11 was a movie. Very few people were there at that time as credible witnesses that weren't exposed as plants. And most of what we saw was a superimposed video compositing layer with a great deal of military concealment fog. But my point is, it was a movie on TV for most people. Even if it was real, most people saw it through the screen. The screened reality uniformly gives us all the same messaging at the same time. And that's their magnificent power, their power to fake that kind of thing into existence. But it's 100% the case that it was more movie than anything. Although you could say that one was also, demolition, and so it was beyond just a movie. It was a movie attached to a demo. But for most people who weren't there, it was specifically just a movie. You could also look at the Palestine train derailment, just like the movie White Noise. Even the mass media said, hey, it's just like the movie. Even many of the actors who were in the movie had to be evacuated from Palestine. But people are like, well, that looks real. That toxic airborne event, that black cloud. And I'm like, yeah, it looks real, but it looks no realer than what was in the movie. That was just filmed there with the same actors. They could fake it with the same special effects. And beyond just special effects and, movie magic, as now a lot of it's just CGI. I mean, they don't even have to be able to fake it convincingly in the real world. And rumor does a lot of it. How many people here saw fires in Maui, direct energy weapons, etc., where the images you were shown and the videos were actually from a few years ago, or it's an exploding transformer, and someone says, yeah, this is from Maui yesterday. Like, people are self-manufacturing, like a hive mind, their own propaganda to lie to themselves. It's incredible. I mean, this is the choose your own adventure reality we live in, and I don't have a problem with it, other than to say that people who call themselves truthers are some of the worst offenders when it comes to not adhering to objective reality. They're worse than the Mandela affected. And there ought to be some standards. Okay, if you're looking at the screen, this is Mountain Dew Solar Flare Tropical Punch. I guess we can just assume that every Mountain Dew flavor is just a hint as to what's to come next. So just a heads up, Solar Flare, Pitch Black was another one. My Third Eye says movies are all produced a year or more before they're released. Yeah, there's plenty of instances I can point out where the movies, like for example, let's just go with Waco, American Apocalypse, it came out 3/23, 2023. The day next day, Trump is out there in Waco, Texas, kicking off his campaign, and he calls it the final battle. So there you go, final battle, Armageddon, Waco, American Apocalypse, launches his campaign in Waco, which ties in to the Dave Koresh, again, as you all know, happened to be 33 when they incinerated him, believed he was Jesus. So you have a right-wing Christ martyr who was the inspiration for Timothy McVeigh, who died at 33. It was the inspiration for Alex Jones, who helped rebuild their church after the fact. And the numbers and the scripting show you that the January 6th thing was planned as far back as Waco. Like, this is long-term news bending. I mean, I'm sorry if it's a big spoiler. I'm sorry to say that we can't change the trajectory of world events because they're already written in advance. And they write them generations in advance. I mean, that's how much power they have. They write the history by writing the news. And if you're not in their big club, and George Carlin is, I would contend, based on the comedy routine he gave before 9/11, your words will just be scrapped later. And there are people who make this argument, and I'm kind of, I like, I find these concepts interesting. Like where does the experiencer versus the experience, like what's the distinction between being just an experiencer and a co-creator? Do synchronicities indicate that we are somehow influencing what follows? Like, these are all interesting ideas, but some people will say that if everybody believes something, it will create some kind of shift and it will be true. And I want to point out that no, we have to preserve objective reality. I sometimes think that we may be the only true objectivists in the world today, because by and large, the objectivist society filters their perceptions through the TV at face value. They believe in everything from NASA to every psyop. They can no longer qualify as objective. But it occurred to me that 90+% of the population believe in the moon landing. Did that make it real? No, it didn't. They can only change your internal world. They can't change the objective one. We can't collectively change it, but they can convince us that we are, because you didn't recycle enough. They're having wildfires in Maui. You killed all those children because you drive a big truck. I mean, it's all just a blame game. The left will say, yeah, you guys did it because your carbon footprints, and the right will say, no, you did it because God's punishing you. Joined by Scotty Smith. Thank you for joining. My third eye says Alex Jones and Bill Hicks were both at the Waco production. That's true. It was a cause for Bill Hicks, and then Alex Jones shows up, and it's his thing as well. They both had the producer Kevin Booth. Ashley Babbitt, the one who was shot at the Capitol, was born 15,666 days after Biden. Interesting. Well, she's not dead, which is good news, but nobody wants to hear it. It's so amazing how truthers, or people in general, are just not inclined to hear the good news. Not even truthers, liars. Okay, so the people who believe the mainstream news, we can just call them liars. We'll say unwitting, but liars nonetheless. You tell them, hey, great news. They can't kill us all. Mass shootings are fake, and nukes are totally just a construct to frighten you. And they will shut you down. They do not want to hear it. It's like they're so resistant to good news. Okay, continuing. 212816 says the last day of this year is 123123. The last time we had that experience of just bizarre palindromes and repetitions was the second month of 2022. And it culminated really with the 22-year-old who was killed on 2/2/2022. His name was Amir Locke. And he was killed during a no-knock warrant because the police just opened the lock. And the timestamp of his death was a mirror of George Floyd's. So the 648 became a like a reverse, where I just kind of think 648, 846, a mirror, it's too much. And then it's like Twin Cities. So Twin Cities, timestamp is a mirror. 2022, 22-year-olds. I was like, what's with all the palindromes? And that was just the beginning of it. But what's the meaning of it? The meaning of the palindromes that month all tied in to the return of Pluto on the 22nd, because the palindrome represents a mirror, like the perfect division down the middle. And we were talking about the Kraken, the schism, the split that was symbolized by the Kraken, or the return of Pluto, or Hades, who is again the one associated with the underworld, and who releases the Kraken in this contemporary mashup myth of this character we call the Kraken, who is also associated again with Godzilla, and that movie's coming up soon. Should be interesting. Okay, let's continue here. Alright, there's plenty of interesting comments about sovereign citizens and all of that. If you want to call in and talk about it, feel free. But I find it all very intriguing. I really do. All these alternative explanations, especially with the words, it all seems to comport, but I'm not inclined to believe that there's any payout attached to your value on any kind of a stock market, although a lot of people do contend that's the case. Alright, moving on. We talked about the leaders at the Digital NATO Summit Monolith getting their instructions downloaded, and how that ties into David Bowie's Savior Machine. And the attraction of the Savior Machine, of course, is that man can't govern. You get Trumps, you get corrupt Bidens. You need something cleaner, something pure. Do you remember when they brought out Sophia, the robot? Sophia is a name that ties into this whole Gnostic thing as well. Another example of appropriation. You'll see it. I use the term syncretism. You could just call it appropriation, but it's a little more targeted because they appropriate and they blend it. But they did take the name Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, that name that represents the goddess, or I'm sorry, the principle of wisdom embodied in this animatronic that they brought out a few years ago. She hasn't been out in a while. But I'm bringing it up because that movie I'm describing, the main character's name is actually Sophia as well. Netflix has gone into full-blown indoctrination. Nothing new there. Everything you see on Netflix is going to happen next year. If it's not happening right now, basically. 212-816 says, I'm here to resurrect poetry. Well, I'm on Twitter right now, and a lot of this stuff is inadvertently, I don't know if I'll call it poetry, but this is a look into the collective id. And you might be able to extract some value out of it. They're going to remove the ability to block people, which has a lot of people worried, and I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm like, wow, open season. You know how many people have blocked me who have plausible deniability over various claims? It could be a golden opportunity. Reach out to so many of these individuals. My third eye says, weeks ago I saw on Yahoo that Rachel Wood was called out as a liar with her Marilyn Manson allegations, but haven't seen anything since. Now, I watched her documentary, and I did a few articles on it because it was replete with 33s, Phoenix, 113, but the basic story is this. The relationship between Rachel Wood and Marilyn Manson was actually a mirror of her relationship in Westworld with the Man in Black. So the Man in Black, played by the actor Ed Harris, wears the black cowboy hat. He plays the Saturnian character, or Hades, because he rules the underworld, or Westworld, where she's a prisoner. And Manson, in their story, in her documentary, kept her a prisoner in the same way, abused her in the same way, threatened her father, just as in Westworld, the Man in Black continually tormented her father. So there's this parallel story that had to do with typing her as a Persephone versus Hades. And the Manson versus Rachel Wood real life story fit that. And here's where it gets even more interesting. When they first met, and this is described in the documentary, she was looking over a balcony, and he walks by and he sees her and he says, "Don't fall." First words. Immediately after, they talk, and they get to work on a script for something that was never released called Alice in Wonderland. So here they are working on some kind of secret screenplay, some movie. But "Don't Fall" is a reference to what happens when we enter the fall. That's when Persephone falls to Hades, and she's owned by the underworld god or whatever, devil, whatever he is, and for a period of the year before she gets back out. And so there's that story that's, again, tracking with it. And then you look at her role in Westworld, and her name is Dolores. And Dolores has a relationship to the character that she plays in the video Lolita. The Marilyn Manson video Lolita, which is based on the Kubrick film Lolita, has her as Dolores Hayes. So Dolores Hayes is another mind control, another subjugated female victim, another Persephone. And I think you could also correlate that with Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and that would easily correlate with this Westworld analogy as well. But in all her different roles here, even with the Alice in Wonderland, he's the Mad Hatter. Marilyn Manson has portrayed himself as a Mad Hatter many times, and he's working with her playing the Alice. So you look at Alice, Mad Hatter, Dorothy, Wizard of Oz, Dolores, Man in Black, Persephone, and Hades. So I'm saying the whole thing with them, it's just 100% a fake ruse, psyop. And what's more, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard story is the #1 trending story right now, or trending series on Netflix. People are actually watching that. So there's your incentive. And there's one more point. One more point. I mentioned the video called Lolita, where she plays the role of Lolita. The song is actually called Heart-Shaped Glasses. And that video, Heart-Shaped Glasses, is kind of the centerpiece to this drama. But there's another song where the lyrics refer to the rape of Persephone is a publicity stunt. It's in this other song, and he just repeats it. And I think that's kind of interesting because she's Persephone, right? And the whole documentary is based on how in the video Lolita, in the music video, she was actually raped. That was the accusation. And so here he is saying the rape of Persephone was a publicity stunt. She's the archetype Persephone role of Dolores Hayes. Westworld plays Dolores. All right, let's continue here. Going through your comments. Now, if you don't know who we're talking about Rachel Hurd and Marilyn Manson and their drama, and I'm saying it's manufactured, probably to end up on some kind of court TV later. Elephant Tusk says, have you ever looked into any past life regression? I've thought about it. I've been thinking about reincarnation quite a bit. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Earth God is worshipped and tithed through environmentalism and the symbol of reincarnation or recycling, which is what they're talking about. In fact, I have these bottled waters, and the packaging says, recycle your bottled water bottles so they can be reborn as denim pants or whatever. I'm like, wow, recycle so it can be reborn. Okay, continuing. No, I have not looked into my particular past life regression, but I've looked into the topic, and I find it interesting, all in all. And there was a book by some author, I think it was called the Spear of Destiny, and it was about Hitler and the idea that he was a part of some like occult secret society, and that the spear that was used to lance Jesus was in his possession. But this story, this book about it, the Spear of Destiny thing, had this idea that this cult, this initiatory society, the Thule Society, would maybe it was mescaline or something, but the idea was they could awaken someone to all of their past lives at once, and that this type of perspective would somehow, obviously you'd have a lot of experience, I'm sure. Here we go, a little info on that. But that's the only book that I ever delved into that really dealt with this idea of um, having the amnesic walls between each incarnation removed. But the reason why we have it would obviously be um, probably to maintain your integrity as a person in the now. I mean, I can't imagine how it would work if you had an experience of an ego going back through so many incarnations. But I don't necessarily say I believe it or not, but I'm just saying it's all over the place. It's encoded into their system. I would even say that the recycling symbol itself has a six-pointed star Saturnian emblem in it. Now it's green, and that's a color associated with, Osiris, pretty much the OG vegetation deity. And you could look at the ground, the Saturnian, the grave, black, but that's because it's in the dark. But the new life that symbolizes the resurrection part of the equation, the green stalks. So you have the black and the green. So the green movement really is, if you ask me, it's worship of Osiris. It's worship of the god of death. And of course the resurrection, side of the equation. And I would even say that the three nails on the recycling symbol could even be construed as a reference to the crucified, dying, resurrecting sun god image. And here's the image of the recycling symbol. And then you can look at the negative space and you see the six-pointed star. Again, that's Saturn. Okay, Into the Break says Kate Perry is JonBenet Ramsey. I've heard that one before. The parents certainly match up. Wouldn't shock me. Does it change anything? This is one of the points that I think is worth getting to. It may be true, but what does it mean? Like, in what context does it make any sense? Like, it's been true since they've talked about it on all the tabloids 10, 20 years ago, I'm sure. It's always been true, if it's true. But it hasn't led anybody anywhere because nobody knows what to do with this puzzle piece that doesn't fit on the puzzle because it's already complete. Like, that's not part of our known world. What do you do with that information? And I have an answer. The answer is you have a parallel media that isn't constrained to the power elite's defined worldview, but also includes the puzzle pieces that don't fit, taking these into account. Oh, look, CIA deepfake technology has always been a part of mass entertainment. Oh, influence operations, perception management, psyops. Okay, let's take this into account. And so we have a broader perspective. So now, when I look at this Kate Perry, JonBenet Ramsey, there's something to look at here. There's a bigger picture. And maybe it has to do with, I'm not quite sure with that one. It's really puzzling. I mean, what's the story other than maybe it's some kind of, and Super Recognizer is the one who came up with this, I think, first, that you subconsciously still process them as their original persona. And it's some sort of purposefully way of messing with your programming to induce cognitive dissonance, which could be the case. In other words, just more of this mental confusion for its own sake, contradiction. Think about the use of loaded questions and logical fallacies to get people to accept things, emotional appeals. It's not like we're entirely rational. Like, this is one other point I'd make, is that the world stage, the world view, the consensus that is the one accepted by the most number of people as their internal experience, I think you could argue that it's an irrational world, that it's not fundamentally guided by logic. In fact, not that I agree with them, but Andrew Tate was on this long interview with Candace Owen, and he suggested that our society is not patriarchal, but that it's matriarchal, in the sense that he said he associates the emotion-based response to things as feminine. And I thought that's an interesting way of looking at it, considering that every single psychological operation is basically requiring you to respond in the moment emotionally with not a lot of information before you rush to judgment. I don't think that necessarily lends any credence to what Andrew Tate was saying, but the point of it is you could make the argument that our society is led by emotional appeals more than anything. So we're not strictly linear left brain, but you could argue that we're a little more sensitive. Skill says disclosure is as likely as finding out who shot JFK. I've done my own research. Oh, I could tell you. It wasn't Oswald. JFK was shot by Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick directed that psychological operation. Now, did Abraham Zapruder really have a camera in hand that day? Possibly. But nobody saw it live. It wasn't a live TV event. It was not even seen until Geraldo Rivera put it on his TV show like 12 years after the fact. And that shows you how controlled media was at that point, where it's all conjecture, it's all rumor, it's all talk, and then you're a conspiracy theorist if you don't believe the official story. Now, whatever happened to Oswald, I don't know, but the way he was shot was obviously staged. Interesting subtext there. A lot of stuff that has been pointed out by James Shelby Downward about Oswald and the meaning of the names and Jack Ruby. He suggests Jack Ruby is a tie-in to the Ruby Slippers that defeat the Wizard of Oz, and correlated a lot of fascinating storylines, specifically from Macbeth as well. But ultimately, the thing was about the killing of the King of Camelot. And there's the Masonic death resurrection thing I mentioned, tied into the Kennedy assassination. So if you look it up on Wiki, for example, the 3 wounds of Hiram Abiff in the Masonic ceremony: head, throat, chest. Where do you think the 3 bullets hit JFK according to the story? Head, throat, chest. It's just totally perfect. Elephant Tusk says, I need an IPS safe space. We talked about this before, but the safe space thing bears repeating. Safe spaces were originally conceived to protect the left from right-wing memes on universities. That became state-mandated social distancing and limitations on how many people could gather in one place. That was another safe space to protect you from what? Viruses. So it went from it'll protect you from mind viruses to now they want to protect you from viruses. But then they realized that the anti-vaxxers who spread mind viruses were on the right, and the same people they needed safe spaces from, they now needed social distancing from. So they've already correlated mind viruses and viruses. Richard Brody, he wrote Virus of the Mind. This book brought up this pseudoscience of memetics. But interestingly enough, this is the book that I think made the case for the existence of mind viruses themselves. And so you could start eradicating thought crimes, for example. But Richard Brody, in addition to pretty much inventing this whole idea of memetics, he invented Microsoft Word. So think about it. Microsoft, Bill Gates, viruses. Microsoft, Richard Brody, mind viruses, words. Because we're talking about words correlated with the virus. And these programmers, or the programming language being somewhat analogous here. But again, the mind virus, the computer virus, the virus, all of these things have to do with controlling our spaces, your physical space and your mental space and the cyberspace. That's why I'm saying that NASA has never been about taking you to some distant paradise or some distant communist moon base or Mars base, but that they've always been about controlling your inner space. Space wars. We're already experiencing it. This is why they don't need to physically nuke us. People are always looking, when are they going to nuke us? When are they going to drop the big one? Well, guess what? They faked us into believing it's real. They already reset geopolitics. They already have us in a hostage situation. It's like a bank robbery where none of the guns are real, but nobody knows this, and they get away with it. That's kind of what's happened. But as long as people keep believing it, they don't have to do it again. The threat is sufficient in and of itself. Okay, continuing. I'm finding a lot of fusion of biblical eschatology and Trumpism surfacing all over the place. That's the only reason why I'm making note of this. Here's another
all
one.
of our moral and religious activities, and all of our governmental and political activities.
Anyway, he just says that the Bible must form the basis of all of our social, financial, moral, political, and governmental activities. Okay. Just again, and then this individual, a little more creative, he strapped a Bible to a baseball bat and he's using it to bash a Barbie house.
With the Bible.
Smashed a Barbie house to a cheering crowd. Okay, now one more point on the space thing. I think it's perfectly relevant here that in the summer of 2020, the ISS astronauts were doing what they called celestial immunity, where they were getting vaxxed. As they were getting vaxxed, a piece of space junk hit the arm of the space station, punctured it with a hole, so it got vaxxed. And I realized that there's a correlation they're making here with space junk and misinformation in your inner space. And that for us to have a cohesive, quote, global society, we have to have cyberspace clean, just like we need outer space clean. In other words, outer space must be a safe space. The cyberspace must be a safe space. So who is the leading purveyor of both mind and space junk? Elon Musk, obviously. What does this mean? It means that he's being used to set an example for why the global community is going to have to clamp down on whatever he's doing. For example, opening the floodgates for misinformation and using his billionaire status to fill up our shared space with a bunch of CubeSats and then using those to help Ukraine, for example, meddling in politics. So there's a few examples I can point to where the character we know as Elon Musk is actually being used to set an example for why we need to, again, make these spaces safe, inner and outer space. And ultimately, we're just talking about censoring minds. Into the Break says Gallagher. This is fascinating what we're looking at here. Like the guy's blowing up the Barbie doll. That's iconoclasm. Well, iconoclasm is turning Barbie into a feminist. Now, when they're destroying the Barbie dolls, that's another form of, I guess it's also iconoclasm, but there's something else. I think it's called burning of the vanities. There's this thing that religious groups do at various times. Like, they burn Harry Potter books, for example. And in this case, the bonfire of vanities. This is the burning of objects condemned by religious authorities as occasions of sin. Like today, if they were going to do this, it would be smartphones for the most part. Smartphones and Barbie dolls. All these sources of corruption. But this is not a new idea. I'm just pointing out that the destruction of idols, the symbolic destruction of these things, it taps into these, I guess, religious impulses. These irrational religious impulses where, yeah, people are cheering. This guy's going full-blown Gallagher on a dollhouse. And he tears it to pieces. I mean, really, it tears it up. Like, this is a strong let me play it again. This preacher is really, really destroying this thing. This is some passion here. His name is Greg Locke. and it's called the Barbie Dream House. I'm going to turn the volume a little lower.
Comes down when you demolish it with the Bible.
Every single whack took a story out of that thing. Okay, moving on here. Skill says it's no secret that X is going for the majority of the world financial markets. Yeah, X, again, it's just a cross. You can't separate the X and the cross at all. Pope's role as this, I'm sorry, Pope Elon's role, to me, part of it is this Constantine-esque conversion where we're going to go through this period of going into this neo-feudalism. What do you think a 15-minute city is? We're talking about serfdom, a fiefdom. We're talking about consolidating the worker the hive into enclosures. That's exactly what a Mars base would look like. Your Mars base is going to be kind of like a fiefdom, but it's going to have a glass dome over it. But it's the same thing. It's fundamentally no different. But the other aspect to this is the consolidation of the Bible and the elimination of the non-canonical texts, etc. And that's where I'm saying we're at right now, where the iPhone or your smartphone, your screens, they're going to be so uniform that they will constitute the same sheet, the one sheet that we're all on. At some point, it will actually be pure enough. But we're actually at that point where I think it's a historic analogy here. Okay, let's see here. People in Maui today issuing orange cards, and you cannot travel to other parts of the island without it. This is such an obvious operation that has nothing to do with climate change or lasers. It's just so well orchestrated and organized. But look, this is just truth or spread misinfo, videos from 2022, videos from Ohio being used to convince people that stuff's going down in Maui. But it's this shameless misinformation, and people are asking what's the point of it. I think I got the answer. And it has to do with impressions, because the more impressions you get, the more you get paid. Clickbait pays, and there's really no disincentive. If you can, post something that goes popular and, bend reality a little bit, what difference does it make? You might even argue that there is no objective reality anyway. So is anybody really lying? Like I've been saying before, you have the truthers and the liars, but they're both completely subjective. Obama's brother says Barack sold his soul to Satan to join the Illuminati. And that is his brother, who doesn't have, I don't think he has any kind of support from Barack, but he's sort of a fixture on the right. And they do this. Like, for example, there's this individual who claims to be Bill Clinton's illegitimate son. And what happens is you see these characters who just sort of become sort of like an indirect way to attack the other side. They're liked just because of who they are. Okay, Hurricane Hillary on the path towards Southern California. Again, I guess you could say that it's, here we go. Someone said here in the chat that it's probably not going to be. Let me find it. I saw this guy saying there's a category 6 that's going to hit, and it would be totally unbelievable what happened, but he said September the 6th. So mark your calendar. But yeah, Hurricane Hillary, and again, you have her nice little logo that has the appearance of 2 towers and an arrow going through them. Okay, someone else here says, okay, it creates Huxley's sea of irrelevance where the truth can hide in plain sight. Yeah, that's where we're at, and I think it's fascinating, but the people who are spamming these truth things, I don't think it's solely for money. I think this is an operation. I do think it's an operation. And the objective here is make the truth irrelevant by shouting it out. Like, you've ever been to like or watch on video these protests where if you're an individual, there's really nothing you can say unless you have a megaphone to be heard. You get drowned out by the mob. And they're doing the same type of thing with this deluge of information where, yeah, you're basically drowned out. It doesn't matter. It's amazing they've made truth irrelevant like that. But it's only irrelevant because the people who are processing it don't have a frame of reference to put it in where it makes sense, where it becomes relevant. And I think that's really where we come in. That's really the point here, if you ask me, is they have destroyed truth by habituating people to rushing to judgment without enough information. And people collectively may have good judgment. It doesn't matter individually, collectively, that our judgment is impaired. You can be the most clear-thinking person in the world, but when it comes down to it, if you're making a rush decision, like with the COVID thing, we all decided, okay, collective sick days. The opposition was obviously drowned out. And the groupthink, the group mind, is easy to influence emotionally, which of course is just a way to get past the firewall of critical thinking. Elephant Tusk says, Obama is the puppet master behind Biden, tasked with destroying the USA. You could say that. I'd question how much can you actually say that Trump isn't part of it as well? I mean, this is so very calculated, if you ask me. Like, I'm thinking that 11/3/2020 and this attempt to subvert it or make the appearance that that's what they were doing, this was an attempt, I believe, to quite literally break it. That was the release the Kraken Day. And, in fact, Trump's going to be brought in here any day now. It should get interesting. Now, we've been talking about Moses and the connection to MLK and how Trump was referred to as Moses in Bedminster by Jim Caviezel. The 33-year-old played Jesus, then he came back, did Sound of Freedom. And I brought it up how this Moses reference has to do with MAGA as the promised land. So he brings it up. Well, then the Oliver Anthony brings it up, talking about how we are, quote, wandering in the desert. So it's not a coincidence that it keeps popping up. This Charlie Kirk brings up the reference of the desert, that we're wandering in the desert and that Moses didn't see the promised land. So I've seen a number of individuals on the right making this correlation with MAGA, promised land, Moses, and here we are, another one, Dave Clements. Now, Dave Clements is an interesting character. He was a major figure at Dave Lindell's Cyber Symposium. Many believe that he is Ingersoll Lockwood, who wrote the time-traveling Baron Trump books, but that he traveled through time. And he does look like Ingersoll Lockwood. Only he didn't look that way before Q. He used to have short hair and clean-shaven. But when Q came out, this guy styled his hair to look like Ingersoll Lockwood, grew out his beard, and dressed the part. So I think this is a character actor. But Dave Clemens, again, is a big name in overturning the election. And here he is giving a speech where he talks about this Moses idea.
It's not the politician you want to win, it's you. It's you. You are the red wave. You are the Red Sea. God won't part it the way that he did before because he has delegated his authority to the body of Christ to move. And when you move, you are unstoppable. But if I could cut the feed.
Now he has a video of himself from a drone camera walking across a desert. And again, they're bringing up all this Old Testament stuff about the desert and Moses.
If I could undo the damage, if I could expose the lies, God help us. Free us from the machines. Free the J6 prisoners.
Free the J6 prisoners. Oh my goodness. Let's continue. 8 more seconds.
Please, God, let my people go.
Let my people go. So again, just to recap, Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, Moses references. Jim Caviezel calls Trump Moses. Trump is arraigned on 4/4, MLK's assassination date, Moses connection, promised land. Then you have the Oliver Anthony making a reference to the wandering through the desert. And now here you have Dave Clemens, Let My People Go. Plenty of references to Moses. I'm just pointing this out. I also want to point out that the phrase, the chickens have come home to roost, that Malcolm X said. After JFK's assassination, Malcolm X said, it's the chickens coming home to roost. Well, that phrase came back with President Obama's preacher, Jeremiah Wright, who said America's chickens have come home to roost with 9/11. Well, that expression was recently tweeted by Sean King, who they call Telcom X because he's white, but he pretends to be black, and he's a major leader in BLM, weirdly, but he actually styles himself to look like Malcolm X. And he said about Trump's arraignment that his chickens have come home to roost. So you have these connections being made between these various voices, all saying the same thing that references an assassination and 9/11, and people getting what they deserve. Dr. Shiva said it too, interestingly. And he's the individual running for president who's probably not going to be at any of the debates, sadly, because he should be. Aline Dion says, good cringe. Oh yeah, when he said, let my people go. Yeah, very good cringe. Good bad. So bad it's good. It's worth experiencing. It's just going to get worse as we get closer. Tropical Storm Hillary, again, Category 3, we'll see. Here we have it. Fulton County DA Fannie Willis seeking a March 4th court date.
Former President Donald Trump, that fictitious document matched exactly the charges that we now see in this indictment. Can you tell us more about that document leak? Because now you have the former president's lawyers who are saying this is emblematic of a serious problem with your office.
No, I can't tell you anything about what you refer to. What I can tell you is that we had a grand jury here in Fulton County. They deliberated till almost 8 o'clock, if not right after 8 o'clock. An indictment was returned. It was true billed, and you now have an indictment. I am not an expert on clerks' duties or even administrative duties. I wouldn't know how to work that system, and so I'm not going to speculate. Next question.
Well, the long and short of it is they're seeking for a March 4th trial date. Again, March 4th, 2024, theater. I don't know why people think it's real or that Trump's an outsider. He's hardwired into this script, and I'll do some more coverage on this Antichrist story because, whether you think it's plausible or not, it really isn't the question here. It's not the point. The point of it is there is a lot to substantiate the people who are making the case that Trump is some kind of world stager who's going to play a particular role that you could consider to be, quote, the Antichrist. Now, they've said this about many presidents. This isn't a new charge to level against somebody, and it may just be predictive programming that has no bearing in what happens in the near future. But there's so much of it that we would be remiss if we didn't actually pour through it to see if this isn't some kind of engineered campaign. Skill says Trump's attorney says it's just a show. Right. Well, they don't mean it in the same way. It is a circus, though. Absolutely, it's a circus. Bread and circuses. And speaking of bread and circuses, who's not fighting is Musk and Zuck. Like, whatever happened with that? Do they just come up with these really good ideas and then bail on it, knowing that the attention span of the public is so TikTokified and so short that they wouldn't remember the fight anyway? So what's the point of doing it? If you can just get people to talk about it, you get the same effect than if you actually went through the whole process and did the fight. Like, maybe that's what it is, because they seem to have just dropped it. Like, it's not even a conversation piece anymore. So in addition to solar flare, we have pitch black to go with your Maui burst. Again, if that's predictive programming. Into the Break says future proves past. What does that mean though? 6 years into Q drops, where people are quite literally taking these drops and reapplying them to the future as though there's a 6 year, like there should be an expiration date on Q drops. Like just eat your popcorn and reapply the Q drops. It's like this is too many years in a row. Okay, here's the part here, Right Wing Watch. This is more Moses Trump programming, Charlie Kirk. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is that there have been many examples of this deliberate martyr template applied to Trump. The MLK thing, the Jesus thing, this persecution thing, these indictments, and as of late, it's moved into this Moses thing.
A 14-day journey took them.
Now, the Moses thing stands out to me in particular because MAGA, again, Make America Great Again. It's the promised land that Moses didn't see. So this is setting the stage for Trump's not going to see his promised land. But that whatever happens with Trump, the idea here is that they want to ensure that the vision is carried forward. And here's what Charlie Kirk says about it.
40 years after complaining and challenging and questioning